thing that we want everybody to do prior to election day is make sure that you are registered to vote. And if you are not registered, we want you to get registered, because you have to be registered in order to cast your ballot. That is, of extreme importance. So in this guide, we're going to find information on how to register to vote and re-registering after you move or after you change your name, because if any of that information changes, then you have to update that information so that it's updated in the system. Early voting in person, which is something that is being advocated for even during the pandemic. Voting by mail or absentee ballot, which is another thing that's being advocated during the pandemic if people don't want to go outside and vote, because we want everyone to be safe. Voting on election day, solving common election day issues, and then, as I said, some helpful resources about other voting topics, and like if you're voting from in jail or outside of the country.
Yeah.
So I'm getting into
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to go to the important dates.
Oh, I was going to say for the voting by mail, there have been some things going on, especially like if you take a look at California. One of the suggestions is that if you're going to vote by mail, go to the post office. Don't go to one of the boxes that's on the street, because there have been certain candidates that have put out boxes that are not official ballot boxes, and so there have been like really major concerns about that.
Yeah, there has been all kind of foolishness and shenanigans and craziness and everything, which is why I mentioned that people are saying vote early during the period of early voting in person, just so you can cast your ballot. But if you must vote by mail, like Anthony said, please be cautious. Please go to the post office, because you just never know. Like, this is a crazy time in general. So thank you for having that point, Anthony. That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
So important dates for the 2020 election. October 5th, 2020, which was last Monday, was the last day to register to vote. So I hope that everyone got registered. And if you don't know whether or not you're registered, you can go to your My Voter page and it will let you know whether or not you are registered to vote. So that deadline has passed. So if you didn't register to vote, I really encourage you to just go online and see whether or not you're registered, and just make sure that you remember having done it, or that you did do it, or something like that, because that deadline has passed, and it's very sad and upsetting if you missed the deadline to register. Anthony, what's going on?
Sorry, my mouse is so sensitive. I just barely touched it.
Okay. The next date is October 12th, which was this Monday, which is when early voting begins. So early voting is going on right now. So you could leave your house, go to an early voting precinct or polling place, and cast your ballot right now today if you really wanted to. You can go, and I voted during COVID. I voted in the June 9th primary. They have masks. They require you to wear masks. They have hand sanitizer. It's sterilized. People are social distancing. So if you're concerned about the pandemic, you shouldn't be, because they're taking precautions for that. So that's important to note. But an early voting lasts this week and next week, and then you have election day. October 30th is the day that early voting ends, and it's also the last day to request an absentee ballot. So if you do plan to vote by absentee, you need to request that absentee ballot as early as possible, because you want to be able to fill it out and put it in the mail as early as possible. But the last day to request an absentee ballot is October 30th. So if you don't want to vote during this early voting period in person, please be sure to order your absentee ballot as soon as you can. And then, of course, November 3rd is the jubilant day of Election Day, which is when we will, take back. We will sort of change power. There will be seats in the Congress that will flip. We will have the same president, or we'll have a different president. But even so, we'll have an opportunity to elect new senators. We'll have an opportunity to elect new state senators and state representatives. In some cities, they're going to get a new mayor. Like, it's just, for me as a policy wonk and a political person, I love Election Day. It's one of my favorite days. I stay up all night and watch the returns come in. And I know that's kind of crazy, but I do. And so it's just a great day. in general for me, because it's the day really that we take back our power. We go to the polls, we elect who we want to be in our government, and that is a powerful thing because a lot of nations don't have that. So I always think election day is a great day. And then November 3rd is also the last day to vote by mail. So you need to put your absentee ballot in the mail, and it needs to be in the hands of the voting people, your county registrar, by November 3rd. That's very important. So I just encourage you all to make a voting plan. If you're going to vote in person early, I encourage you to do so as soon as possible. If you're going to vote by mail, I encourage you to request a ballot and send it back as soon as possible. Those are the important dates, and just write them down, put them on your calendar, and just make sure that you know when they are, because these deadlines do matter. But we can go on.
Yeah, so we had a have a question. What is the area that we vote, and how to do it? So I assume that, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you wrote this, you meaning like where do we go and vote, and how to do it? And I think we're gonna get to the how. The where, I'm not quite sure how to answer that.
Okay, if you are registered to vote, you can go to myvoterpage.com, I think it is. It's myvoterpage.com or .gov. And you will be able to put in your first initial, your last name, the county that you're registered in, the county that you live in, and your birthday. And all of this information will pop up for you. It will tell you what precinct you go and vote at. It will tell you the address. It will tell you where you vote at on election day. You can vote there early, or you can vote there on election day. If you're in Fulton County, you can just simply Google Fulton County early voting places, because you can vote anywhere during early voting. You don't have to vote in your precinct. So you can Google whatever county you're in and early voting places, and it'll let you know. Or you can go to your My Voter page, and it'll tell you where your voting precinct is. And it'll give you the address. You just pop it in your GPS, and you just go.
Oh wow! So you can go anywhere to vote. You don't have to necessarily vote. Like if I wanted to go to, because I know they're hosting it at the State Farm Arena, I could go there and just vote. Or
during early voting, you can.
Okay.
On election day, you have to vote at your polling place. During early voting, you can vote at any polling place in your county. You have to be a citizen of that county. But if you're a citizen of that county, you can vote in any precinct in that county.
Okay, awesome. And I will put I'll put the link in the chat, as well as I'll put it as an answer for you, so that everybody can see it. And I will go to the next page, do my duty. There we go.
Okay, so this page right here talks about registering to vote. And so this is just information for you if you want to register now, or just know about this for future elections. So the 5 requirements to register to vote in Georgia: you have to be a U.S. citizen, you have to be a resident of Georgia, you have to be 18 years or older on election day to vote, because the voting age is 18 in Georgia, obviously, and in the United States. Not currently serving a sentence for a felony conviction. People who are serving a sentence for a felony conviction, and this includes the time you're in prison and the time you're on probation and parole, you are not eligible to vote. You are effectively disenfranchised. So once you have completed that sentence, which includes the time you're actually physically incarcerated and the time that you might be on probation and parole, once you've completed that, you can have your voting rights reinstated. And then not mentally incompetent. So if you meet all of those requirements, you can register to vote. And you must, as I said before, you must register to vote if you are a first-time voter in Georgia. So if you've not ever voted, if you just now turned 18, you haven't voted before, you got to get registered. You got to make sure you're registered. You can register online at the Secretary of State's website, and this PowerPoint has a link. I don't know if Anthony sent it out, but it's the SOS, the Secretary of State, sos.gov website. You can register, or you can just Google it. A lot of this stuff is Googleable. Or you can register by mail, and they also have a link to the form, and you can Google it to get the form. And you must have a valid Georgia driver's license or a state-issued ID card. And I know that sometimes can be a really big barrier, and that's why organizations like Georgia Empowerment are so important, because we need to make sure that our young people have access to these very important documents, because if you don't have them, then your rights, such as, you know, being able to vote, can be a little bit harder to come by. So we want to make sure that you guys have your driver's licenses and stuff and your state issued ID so that you can be able to cast your ballot.
I'm gonna use my. I would say I'm gonna use my military ID.
Yeah, your military. Yeah. Any government issue ID. Exactly. Or you can register in person. You can go to your county's register office, which you can also Google that, like where is that, and then just go there. Department of Driver Services, when you get your driver's license or when you renew it with new information, you can, I think they ask you, do you want to register to vote at your new address or under your new name or whatever, and you just be like, yeah, I want to. And so they'll register you with your updated information. If you're getting a hunting or a fishing license, I don't know if our young people are getting that, but if you're getting those, you can do that, or you can, you know, vote in any government office that's listed by statute. And this, where you see this OCGA 21 these numbers, that just is Georgia statute. So this is where the laws are located. So there are certain government offices that are designated by law wherein you can go and register to vote. If you click on that link, there will be a list of them there. You must prove your citizenship. So as I stated before, you have to have a driver's license or a birth certificate or passport or something where the government can say, okay, you are who you say you are. And of course, there are various reasons for that. One of which is, you know, trying to deter fraud and things of that nature, but just making sure that you all are aware that you have to have these various documents when you go to vote. You must re-register to vote if you change your name or moved. And that is, I think I might be frozen. Can y'all see me? Can you see me, Anthony? Okay. Yeah. So before October 5th, 2020, you must either re-register with the DDS while updating your driver's license, which I just mentioned. If you go in, because I just recently had to do this. I moved and I went and got my license changed with my new address, and I knew that I would be changing polling places. And I said, well, you know, I know that I'm moving, so let me make sure that I do this. And they asked me, I believe, do you want to register with your new address? And I said, yes. You can send a written document to your registrar office, or you can submit a new voter registration application through the mail. And then the next question is, where do I vote after I re-register? And then it says, you will need to vote at your new location. Once you update your information in the system, as I said, if you go to your My Voter page, you will be able to see your updated polling place. And that's the place that you would go to on election day when it's time to vote. So when I lived at my old address, I looked on my Voter page and I had a certain elementary school that I would vote at. And now when I look at it, there's a totally different place that I would go to and vote, just because my address has changed. They do update that information. If you haven't already, please check to make sure that you are registered to vote. If you do plan on voting on November 3rd, 2020, that's really important. You must be registered to vote. If you are not registered, you cannot vote. That's very important. And you have to register to vote before October 20th for the November 2020 election. So I hope that all of you are registered because the deadline is passed. I hope that Anthony did his job and just reminded everybody and made sure that everybody was registered, because that's very important. We can go forward. Forward.
My mouth is so sensitive. That's page 3.
This is page 6. So voting methods, step by step. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. You can vote by mail, you can vote in person, you can vote on election day, all of these things. But vote by mail, that's absentee ballot. You can vote by mail with an absentee ballot. You just have to fill out the absentee ballot application. And this is the way that you request an absentee ballot. You fill out the application, and then when you fill it out, you will have submitted your request for an absentee ballot. And then they will send your absentee ballot in the mail. Once you receive your ballot, you can fill it out, you can mail it to your county registrar's office as soon as possible. Like I said earlier, once you get it, fill it out and just put it back in the mail. That's very important. Or, and I think they give you an envelope that you can put it in and send it back. So you don't have to worry about, like, you know, where am I going to get an envelope? Where am I going to get a stamp? All that kind of stuff. You can just send it back with the envelope and stuff that they provide to you. or you can drop it off at a county drop-off location before Election Day. And then there's a list of your county registrar drop-off locations. And that's what Anthony was referring to earlier, where they have these little mailbox-looking things all over your county. I know in Gwinnett County, there's quite a bit of them because Gwinnett is a fairly populous county in Fulton County. So you can just look up where they are and just draft one and just pop it in, making sure, as Anthony mentioned, that it is an official drop-off and you're not just putting your absentee ballot in any old place, because that's very important. You want to make sure that your vote is counted.
Take it to the post office. Just take it to the post office, and also don't hand it to anybody. If people saying that they're collecting it, because that's been a thing too. So the culprits for the boxes, those have been kind of like Republicans, especially in California. People handed them to them. Those have kind of like been in those areas that are kind of like they are minority like populated, and people say, yeah, we'll take your ballot in, and then you never know what happened to it. So just go to the post office or go to your local place. Let's just be as sure as possible.
Yes. Yeah. You can never, ever, ever be too careful, especially in 2020, because anything is possible. That's very, very important to remember. Absentee ballots, if you have, if that's how you want to vote, they are mailed starting September 19th. You just notify, if you did not receive it, if you requested one, you went online, filled out the application, and you didn't receive it, please notify your county registrar. I think for the June primary, that was a really big issue. People had requested absentee ballots and they didn't get them. They didn't get them until, it was too late, or, it was just all sorts of issues. So that's why, in this instance, time is of the essence. And so we want to make sure that we're doing things as early and as soon as possible, so we can avoid all those last minute snafus and issues. We don't want to deal with any of that. So if you want to vote in person or didn't receive your absentee ballot, you can go to, and I've seen this done on June 9th when I voted in the primary, you can go to your voting location and cancel your absentee ballot and vote there. So there was a lot of instances where people had requested an absentee ballot and it never came, and they were like, you know what, I'm just gonna go and vote in person. And when you get there, the polling person can have an affidavit that says, I never received it, I want to cancel it, and I want to vote in person. And they will do that for you. And where I went to the South Fulton Service Center, they had the affidavits for everybody, because if you recall, during the June 9th primary, they sent out, absentee ballot application requests to everybody. And a lot of people never filled them out or didn't get them or whatever. So they just automatically had you cancel it. So when that happens, you sign an affidavit, which is just, a form, and you're allowed to cast your ballot in person that day, which is very important. So that's another thing. If you think that you were going to vote by mail and you requested it, but you didn't get it, whatever, you can still vote in person. It's not a complete bar. So that's very important. So the next way to vote is early and in person. And this is my personal favorite way to vote. I always vote early. I always vote in person, even before the pandemic. So the step one, obviously, is making sure you're registered. Step two, find a voting location, and then they provide a link. But also, if you're in Fulton County, you can Google where the early voting locations are. I usually vote at the South Fulton Service Center because I live in South Fulton. As I said earlier, you can vote at any early voting location during early voting. You don't have to vote at your one designated polling place during this time from October 12th to October 30th. The South Fulton Service Center is not my designated precinct. I vote there, and I vote there early and in person. But if I were to vote on election day, I would actually have to go to my polling place. So that's another important distinction between early voting. And it may even be more convenient for you. And polls are open from 7 to 7 every day. And all you have to do is show up and make sure that you have your picture ID that we talked about, your driver's license or state ID or military ID or what have you. So that's important to know about early voting. If you want to sort of be in the jubilance of the day and you're so excited and you want to vote on election day and cast your ballot like so many of the people who have come before us, you can vote on election day. And it's the same as voting in person. Lines to be considerably longer on election day because it is the last day to vote and people want to get their ballot cast and they want to show up and they want to be there. I mentioned that polls are open from 7 to 7. But if sometimes lines can be, you sit in line 4, 5, 6 hours, and sometimes that will go after 7 o'clock. If you are in line on election day at 7 o'clock or before, remain in line. Do not get out of line after the polling, after the time of 7 o'clock has passed. Because if you are in line by that time, you are allowed to vote. And I have seen it happen in certain precincts where people have been there at midnight the next day to 1 a.m. and they have still been allowed to vote. And so don't let anyone tell you that if you are there past 7 o'clock that you can't vote. If you get there before 7 o'clock and you're in line, stay in line. Even if the lines are long, even if people are leaving, do not leave, because it is very important to make sure that you stay there and cast your ballot. And people leaving and people being told that they're going to be, the lines are going to be long and it's going to be way too much for hassle, that is a form of voter suppression. They want you to leave the line. They want you to get out of line and they don't want you to cast your ballot. Stay, because it is your right. And just make sure that you have your ID and that you're ready to vote when your time comes. Anthony, did you want to add something?
Oh no, I was gonna mention that, but you got to it. Yeah. So it's not like Walmart cashier lines. Like they just can't cut you off and say, "Oh yeah, I'm off." If you're in line, you are legally allowed to stay there until you cast your ballot. So.
In some instances, on June 9th, Fulton County precinct stayed open till 9. So if you were in line by 9 o'clock, you were able to stay. So they extended it for 2 hours. So, and just listen out for those kinds of things because they happen on election day. People will say, a notification will go out that all Fulton County precincts are staying open till 9 or whatever. And if you're in line by that designated time, you're allowed to stay and you're legally allowed to. So that's very important. You can go to the next slide. Bring your ID. We've talked about IDs, but we can't stress enough, you do have to have some form of ID to vote. And I could really get into, the Voting Rights Act and how it was changed in 2013 and how voter ID laws started to crop up and how it was very controversial. But I won't go the legal route today because I know that's not the purpose of this, but just know that you need your ID to be able to vote. You need an ID. You need a state issued driver's license, or a government issued military ID, or state issued regular ID. It doesn't have to be a driver's license, but you need some sort of photo ID to be able to vote. And so that's what you need to be able to vote in person. Either a driver's license, even if it's expired, a valid ID card with a photo issued by the state or the federal government, which would cover Anthony's military ID, a valid employee ID form from any state or federal government entity, a valid passport. If you have a passport, you can use your passport, military ID or tribal ID. And I know in some areas out west, they have a lot of members of tribal communities, and they're allowed to have their tribal ID. What if you forget your ID? Don't forget your ID. Please don't. But what if you, and that's why it's important to have a voter plan, because you're going to plan to have your ID. Do not forget it. If you do forget, you may vote in a special way, which is a provisional ballot. Now, provisional ballots are not ideal because if they can't verify your information within a certain amount of time, it won't be cast. And that's why it's called a provisional ballot. So we want to make sure that you get an actual ballot and not a provisional ballot. So if you forget your ID, you will have to cast your ballot in a form that is less protective than casting it via the electronic process or casting it through absentee ballot. So it's very important that you have that ID on you at that time. It says your vote will only be counted if the registrar can verify your identity within 3 days after the election. So if they are not able to verify who you are because you have forgotten your ID and you are now voting by provisional ballot, your ballot will not be cast. It will go to the wayside. So please, please, please have your ID. This is also important. If you registered to vote by mail or did not provide a valid ID when you registered, this is about registration now, and have not voted in Georgia before, so if you just turned 18, you have not voted, then you must present a recent copy of any of the following form of ID when you vote or submit your absentee ballot. Any one of the acceptable forms of ID noted above, which if you have those, you're going to be fine. A utility bill, a bank statement, a government check, a paycheck, or some other form of documentation that shows I am who I am and I live at this address. Because they're just trying to verify your identity in various ways. So please, I can't stress enough, if you're going to go vote in person, please bring your ID with you. We do not want people casting votes through provisional ballot. If you must cast your vote via provisional ballot, we want you to do that. But ideally, it would be ideal if you did have your ID, you were able to cast your vote in a regular way. Because if they can't verify your information, it's not going to be cast. So that's important.
Yes, bring that ID even if it's expired.
Yes. Next slide. Okay. Common election day issues. And some of the stuff we've touched on just a little bit. First question, what happens if the voting location closes while I'm still in line? It says very clearly, keep your place in line. You are entitled to vote using a regular ballot if you were in line by the time the voting location closes, as I mentioned. 7 o'clock, if you're in line by 7, stay in line because you can cast a regular ballot. They are not entitled to give you a provisional ballot. You can vote normally. And if somebody says otherwise, then there are numbers here that you can call. It says call the following election protection hotline if you run into problems or have questions on election day. And these numbers are really important because people do call them. I've heard of people calling and getting information from these lines. And if people are telling you, some false information like, oh, we're closing at 7, so we're going to hand out all provisional ballots, and here you guys go. Absolutely not.
Nope.
You need to keep that place open so that you can cast your ballot, a regular ballot, and not a provisional ballot. And so now that you know this, you'll be able to say this to not only to the poll workers, but to the other people standing in line who want to leave. Or if you see people drive up, and it's 6:50 and they're like, oh snap, this line is long, it's 6:50, they're about to close, let's leave. No, not leave. Those people can vote just as well as you can vote if they are there and they are in line before 7 o'clock. What if I am not on the registered voter list? Ask the election worker to double check the list of registered voters, which they do have access to that information. Sometimes names are misspelled, whatever. First and middle names are out of order, or hyphens are missing, or present with their spaces. It's weird. Just ask them to double check and just make sure that your name is there. And it says if your name isn't on the registered voters list, ask the election worker to check the supplemental list of voters. So that's a buzzword. There's a supplemental list of voters that you can ask them to check. So if your name is on the first list, they can check this second list. So we want to make sure that you exhaust all of these options before you leave and are discouraged from voting. If your name cannot be found on either list, then you can ask for a provisional ballot. As I mentioned earlier, the provisional ballot, that's the less safe ballot, but it's still a regular form of way to vote, and that if they can verify your information, that ballot will be cast. And then there's more information about provisional ballots in the next question.
Can I make sure? So for those of you who I see a few more people are joining on both my screens. So if you have questions, please type them. Use the Q&A. Use the Q&A box, and I'm looking at them. I have it open on my screen.
Okay. So how do I vote using a provisional ballot? A provisional ballot is just like a regular ballot, except that your vote will only be counted if the registrar can verify your credentials within 3 days after the election. That's very important. It's the same. If they can verify your information, your vote on your provisional ballot should be cast just like any other ballot. However, if they cannot, your vote will not be cast. So that's an important distinction that needs to be, cannot be emphasized enough, especially if you feel like you run into issues and have to vote by provisional ballot. The polling place will have a notice explaining your rights when using a provisional ballot. So ask the election worker to show you that notice, and they'll be able to give you information about provisional ballots and how it's cast and how they verify your information and all of that stuff. And really what this is telling you is that just advocate for yourself at the polling place. Don't allow them to turn you away. If they say you're not on the list, hey, check the other list. If they say you're not on the other list, say, well, can I have a provisional ballot? If they give you a provisional ballot, ask them about how your information is going to be verified. Don't just sort of say, well, okay, and leave. You know, there are ways that you can cast your ballot and make sure that you have the right information when you're there. And that's very important. To make sure your provisional ballot is counted, you can take the following steps. Submit an acceptable form of ID or any other required information to your county's registrar office immediately, because that's going to help you verify in that 3-day time period after Election Day. Check your provisional ballot status at the MVP login page. That's the My Voter page that I was telling you about earlier, where you go in and you put in your information. You can go on there and see whether or not your provisional ballot has been cast. Or you can call your county's registrar office to make sure they received everything and that your ballot was counted. And also they give the website and the phone number for your registration office is also online. You can Google it and find it there. What if I go to the wrong polling place? It says you may vote with a, so if you're on election day and you go to the wrong polling place, you may vote with a provisional ballot. If you're properly registered to vote and are still in your county, according to, that's if you're properly registered to vote and are still in your county, according to that code section. Otherwise, you will need to go to your voting location. It's not uncommon for a voter registrations list to show on the incorrect address. Even if you didn't move or you notified the county that you moved, if this is the case, initial on, I'm trying to read this information. Insist on casting up, that's what I was saying earlier. If this is the case, insist on casting a provisional ballot and then follow up with your county's registrar immediately and make sure the mistake is fixed and your ballot is cast. So if you go to the wrong polling place, either leave and go to your right polling place. They'll be able to tell you this is not the right polling place, or you can cast a provisional ballot and then submit your information, your ID to your county registrar office and just make sure that your provisional ballot is cast. Other common election day issues. Having some technical difficulties. Oh Lord.
Oh, it's fine. So, while you do that, so I know at the bottom, the last one, what happens if my voting machine doesn't work? It says tell the election worker if the problem continues, then you should ask to vote with a paper ballot. And so I know last voting cycle, there was a huge issue where somebody had filmed it where they typed in their vote, and then when they go to hit enter, it switched over to the other candidate or to the other option or whatever. So pay close attention to things like that. Let me just say, technical things can happen, but no conspiracy theories. All right, so
don't scare the people. This is not an episode of Scandal. So when we're not doing, memory cards and computer chips and Russia and all this. We're just gonna do things normally and make sure that everything goes well. Like Anthony said, it's very important to note, once you have, clicked all the boxes or whatever you've done, at the end, make sure that what you clicked is what is actually showing on your ballot. Now, with these new voting machines, I don't know if you all have been following the news, but Georgia has got new voting machines. They're bigger, they take up a lot more space, so there's fewer of them in your polling places. But at the end, it will print out your ballot. So you will get actually paper forms. And when you get that, look and make sure that if you voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, or if you voted for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, that is actually clicked on your ballot. And go all the way through and make sure that everyone that you voted for or wanted to vote for is actually represented on your ballot before you submit it at the final stage of voting. Because we don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but we want to make sure that there's no switcheroos happening at the last minute. We want to make sure that nothing is, just amiss We want to just make sure that everyone that we intended to cast our ballot for has been cast. And so it's very important to just make sure you do that as a final step before submitting your ballot.
Yeah, and I want to amend that statement. Everyone and everything that you're voting for.
Right. Oh, yes, exactly.
Because, I made an amendment to your statement. So you're not just voting for people. You're voting for laws. You're voting for a lot of other things that there are a lot of other things that come on the ballot. So make sure that you check everything.
Exactly. And this year there are 2 what we call ballot initiatives, and it's 2 constitutional amendments. So they're going to be changing the Constitution in various ways. So just make sure that you have your information on that. The Georgia Constitution, the national one.
1 second, I'm looking for my other screen. There you go. So I definitely want to make sure that people know about this site. So there was another site, and I spoke about this earlier. There was another site that I sent to Mesa to see if this was great, and it was a legit site, but it was leaning towards the side. And like I said, our job isn't to persuade you either side. It's just to give you the facts, and you take it and do what you're supposed to do, or do what you want to do. Before we get to this, there was 2 questions in the chat. So what are the amendments on the ballot? Are they explained? Are they explained on the ballot? So I'll ask that question first. Are the amendments explained on the ballot?
Yes. So there are 2 of them. The first one is about fees that are collected and whether or not they should go to their intended purpose. So the, I guess, rationale behind that is a lot of times fees, government fees, general fees are collected and they're put into the general fund. And then they are just put to, whatever governmental purpose that they want them to go to. And I think the issue has been that some fees that have been collected for environmental purposes have not gone to environmental causes. They have been put into the general fund and sort of dispersed however they want to. And a lot of them have not been going to, a lot of the funds generated from the fees have not been going to that particular purpose. So this ballot initiative would ask, do we think that those fees collected for a particular purpose could go to that intended purpose? And so you'll vote yes or no, depending on if you want them to go to the intended purpose or if you want them to continue to go into the general fund. That will be your discretion to vote yes or no on that. And they're yes or no questions. So you just yes if you say you agree with that, or no if you want things to stay how they are and you don't want to change the Constitution. The second one is about sovereign immunity. Go ahead, Anthony.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm curious about sovereign immunity.
Yes,
I know that was on here. Go ahead, yes. I'll find it.
Yeah, you can go ahead and pull it up, because the way that these ballot initiatives are written can be like totally confusing, and you'll just be like, I don't know what this means. But sovereign immunity is the broader topic of sovereign immunity. This has to do with whether or not people can sue the government. Sovereigns, so government entities, like the Department of Family and Children Services or the Department of Driver Services, these are governmental entities. So you're not allowed to sue them for just for whatever. They have immunity in that regard. And so this would be changing how that immunity is set up. And I don't want to misspeak on this because this one is really.
I think this is it right here. This is what you're speaking of.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to just read it to you all. The amendment would allow you to affirm your rights by seeking declaratory relief from state or local laws that violate the the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, or state law. However, a court will not award damages, attorney's fees, or other costs of litigation unless authorized by the state legislature. After granting, is this it? Yeah, this is right. Georgia sovereign immunity, a legal doctrine that holds the government cannot be sued without consent. So this would allow you to sue the government for declaratory relief, which is a legal term. That just means like you would be able to get the government to say, this is wrong, or we're going to stop doing this. That's what a declaratory judgment means. And if I hadn't gone to law school, I would never have known that in a million years. but that's what a declaratory judgment is. And you can get them to stop doing something that is violating either the United States Constitution, the state constitution, or any state law. So you will vote yes if you want to be able to sue the government for declaratory judgment for violating those 3 pieces of legal doctrine, or you'll vote no if you think citizens should not be able to sue the government for a declaratory relief for violating those 3 things. And it's really, that is kind of the way that I can sort of simplify it, but that's basically what that means. So you'll vote yes or no, depending on how you feel about people being able to sue the government for various grievances and forms of relief. And I know that was confusing. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah. So I think that's good, because I didn't really know about that one until I started reading over some of these. I want to get to the other question that was asked. So also, what if a person running for office does not have an affiliate party, such as a Democrat or Republican? So what if they're like a Green Party or I forget some of the other parties, like those Unitarian parties?
The independent parties are on the ballot. So if there are actually, if you look at a sample ballot right now, there are 3 presidential candidates on there. There's Joe Biden, there's Donald Trump, and then there's the independent candidate. So you will see them. If they're in another party, they probably did not make it on the ballot. But those 3 candidates will be present on the ballot. The U.S. Senate race, you'll see 3. You'll see the Democrat, and you'll see the Republican, and you'll see the independent candidate. The independent candidate is usually going to be listed alongside the 2 major parties. For the other senatorial race, there's going to be quite a few candidates there, because there is a special election that's happening. So you'll see multiple Democrats, you'll see multiple Republicans, you'll see like 20 names that are there. And you can pick from any one of those. And the only reason why it's set up that way is because it's a special election, because the person who held that seat resigned, and now all of these people have thrown their hat in the ring, for that specific seat. And they can be independent candidates, Green Party candidates, Democrats, Republicans, write-ins, whatever. They're going to be on the ballot. But for every other race, I think you'll see the 2 major parties candidates and the independent candidate. And other parties probably won't be on the ballot.
Yeah. And so there was a clarification. It said or no party list at all, just the name. So with that same question, so if the person running for office does not have an affiliate party at all, and can there just be their name on there as an independent?
You can write in a candidate, but a lot of
writing my name.
Yeah, you can write in somebody. If there's somebody you want to vote for and they're not on the ballot, you can write them in. But a lot of this about different parties and different candidates and stuff like that, a lot of that was taken care of in the primary. But when you vote in the primary, that's everybody who's running. They're on there, and then you vote for them, and then it's the people who win that are the ones who are going to be on this ballot. So this is going to be whoever got the most votes in the primary, in the Democratic primary, is going to be the Democratic candidate. Whoever got the most votes in the Republican primary is going to be the Republican candidate. So you're not going to see a whole bunch of other parties and other candidates there for this general election.
Awesome. He says, thank you. All right. So this site, I put the link in the chat. So there are a few links in the chat. So this site, I kind of like it. There's another site that I like too. That's just very neutral. Like give me the facts. Let me make my decision. Don't cater to me. So I like this one because it kind of gives like an overview of who your people are, what you're voting for. And so as far as presidents, it says who backs them and things like that. It gives you a little bit about their biography, like you click on the tabs, and then their issues, like where they stand on issues. So women's right to choice, COVID, protecting democracy, immigration. Like you click on this and it tells you where they stand on all of them. For here, like you go to and see U.S. Senate number 1. So what do those numbers mean?
Senate 1 and Senate 2, kind of what I was mentioning earlier, there are 2 Senate. So every state, let me just start at the beginning. Every state has 2 senators. There's 50 in all in the United States Congress. This year, both of Georgia's senators are on the ballot. You have Senate 1, which is David Perdue, who is the incumbent, who is the Republican candidate, versus Jon Ossoff, who was selected in the Democratic primary to be the Democratic candidate. So that means you have the incumbent who's there in the Senate right now, running against someone who is challenging him in Jon Ossoff. That's our first Senate race. Our other Senate race, they're usually not on the ballot at the same time, because as I mentioned earlier, one of our senators resigned. We now are in a special election to be able to elect the person who is going to replace our senator who resigned. And so that's why you have Senate number 2. So right now, the leading Democratic candidate, as I mentioned, when you go to the voting booth and you see Senate number 2, there's going to be so many candidates there. There's going to be about 20 of them because it's a special election, and it's kind of like, it's called the jungle primary. There's, it's anybody's game. But the people who are right now in the running, who have kind of emerged as the forerunners, there's going to be Kelly Loeffler, who was appointed by Governor Kemp to replace Johnny Isakson right immediately in the wake of his resignation. And then there's Reverend Raphael Warnock, who I'll be casting my ballot for, who has emerged as the Democratic frontrunner. And then you also have Doug Collins, who is another Republican, and Matthew Lieberman, who is another Democrat, who is going to also be on the ballot as well, in addition to these 20 other candidates.
Yeah, I see that list. Click more to see more candidates.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of them because it's a special election, so everybody is just kind of willy-nilly.
Yeah, and be sure to know your district. That's why you should go to that link that I put in the chat. That Temesa spoke about, the My Voter page. It's at the top, and I posted it a few times. So go there. These are some of the amendments that you'll be voting for. Dedicated tax-free revenue. I'll go ahead and click that so you can see what it does.
These are local,
yeah.
It looks like. Yeah.
Oh, what I do? Do I need to go up?
Oh no, you didn't do anything wrong. Some of them, some counties will have another additional ballot initiatives. Like I think Fulton County has like a local, tax exemption or something that's going to be on there. So it varies depending on where you live. Like you have to know your district and your county and what's going on there, and you may see different things on your ballot.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of information, and I think I'm voting early next week. I already put it in my calendar to go do it. I'm going to be out there at 6, or not 6, but 6:40 or something like that, so I can just be one of the first people in, so I can go. And I'll be bringing my trusty Nintendo Switch just in case those lines get too excessive, and I need to be out there for a little bit longer. So bring your headphones. If it'll be cold, bring some warm clothing or what have you. But yeah. But Temesa, as always, it is great hearing from you. Thank you for enlightening us, adding wrinkles to our brains with knowledge. We really appreciate it. We know that you passed the bar. We already know it. We seen the test. And I don't know, like if there's anything that you need from us, like hit us up, and I'll be bugging you. Probably do some more voter stuff or some more policy webinars or podcasts or what have you. But we really appreciate you.
No problem. And if y'all have any questions for me, I'm available. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Anthony knows me. I'm around if there are questions about stuff. And if I don't know, I'll do my best to find out and get you the best information that I possibly can get to you. So I enjoy giving this information. I enjoy answering your questions. So just, hit me up. I'm around.
Awesome. With that being said, I hope everyone got something. They said they enjoyed the webinar. We really appreciate you. Next Tuesday, 5:30, from 5:30 to 6:30, we're going to be going over students' rights, especially during this time of COVID. And we have Georgia Appleseed Center for Law and Justice coming on. let's see, could possibly social media inbox. We have our social media, and that's in the link behind me. Actually, I'll turn off my camera so you can have a bigger, better picture of it. Yeah, so you can go to any of our social medias if you want to sign up for those. We have our Discord. We're gonna start doing some more gamings, and pretty soon we're gonna be teaching how to cook. So some life skills lessons and things like that. So might bring some Mesa back to teach us her favorite dish. But thank you all. We really appreciate you for joining, and thank you to Mesa. You have a great, wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thanks for having me, guys. Good night.
Good night.